Okay, welcome to another episode of the Oddball Podcast. I am your host, Johanna, and I am here co-hosting with
Mya.
And today we are so excited to have Catherine on our podcast. Welcome. Thank you for making the drive down. So you are from Fort St. John.
Yes.
And we are filming in Dawson Creek, which for folks that don't know, it's about a 45-minute, 50-minute drive down. So thank you. We really appreciate you making the trip and being part of our podcast.
Yeah. How were the roads?
Oh, they were fine. Yeah. It's, hovering among freezing right now. It's a bit wet, but no, it was good.
It was good. Well, we're so happy that you came down to be part of this Oddball podcast. And the reason we wanted you to be on our Oddball and join the Odd Pod and be odd with us is because you do so many fascinating things. You do everything from you're an artist to a facilitator to you lead safe space workshops. You do it all. You do storytelling as well, which we love because we're storytellers ourselves. So tell us, Catherine, who are you? What do you do?
Absolutely. Tanse, Catherine de Sicasson. Hello, my name is Catherine, and in Cree or Northern Michif, that's what I just said. My last name is Ruddell. My dad was the late Brian Ruddell, and my mom is Lorianne Ray, and I'm Métis on my mom's side. So my family actually comes from Spirit River area, and before that Jasper House, and before that back east, so even as far as Haudenosaunee territory. So some of my family names include Tastowich and Winniandi, as well as Lorian and Thomas. Pardon me, I gasped there for a second. So Dawson Creek, it's funny, driving from Fort St. John to Dawson is just a normal thing to do.
Yep.
I think when you live in the north, spaces...
Yeah, it's a lot different.
It's a lot different. You go a little farther to do fun things. So I kind of grew up swimming in the Kaskatna and Rotary Lake, which used to be a outdoor swimming pool here in Dawson. Yeah. So it's kind of funny. Now. It is, yeah. So there's not a lot of distance between Fort St. John and Dawson when you live in the Peace.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure. So tell us a bit about your artistry. What is it that you do for us? And share a little bit about that.
Well, it's interesting. I think I'm really identifying as a creative entrepreneur because what I do in art changes so much. But it's a really it's an interesting thing to identify as an artist through different life stages. I think I grew up really loving to draw and paint and all those kind of things you do in school, all of the exploration that happens. And then my uncle taught me to sew when I was younger as well. So I started sewing baby blankets and then,
That's a skill we need to bring back.
It's a life skill, really.
Yeah. It is.
Sewing has kind of been a through line too. So I started going thrift store shopping and then adjusting clothes.
Oh, cool.
Making my own clothes in high school because you always want something
cool.
different and new. And, I think the only clothing store was oh my gosh.
Here.
Bootlegger and Mr. Magoo's, which goes way back. I'm dating myself. But yeah, you want something different. So I just started sewing things. And then my first career was as a fashion designer. So
cool.
I left Fort St. John and went to college in Vancouver. I studied art history for a year because I was waiting to get into a fashion design program. And then I did a diploma. So I spent a couple of years working for a clothing company in Vancouver, and I was a classic. I was really broke and had student loans. And it's okay, well, how am I going to pay these off? So then I actually was in hospitality for a large part of my career. So I think I'm a people person as well. Yeah. So that's a great match. If you enjoy being with the public, then, cafes, restaurants, resorts.
Lots
They're
of
great
customer service.
because you get to hear other people's stories.
Right,
And I think, too, as an artist, like, the story is what really makes or inspires whatever medium you go to pick up next. So, yeah. And then as an adult, really just able to experiment with different things. So, like, textile's always been, like, my first love. And I've done a lot of different techniques that way. So, like, painting on textiles, printing on textiles, sewing, right? Like, I've always been drawn to pattern. That's, you go into a fabric shop and that's what, like...
Yeah. Do you still make clothes? Like,
not clothes necessarily, because it is time consuming, and if you want a nice fabric, like, the fabric gets really expensive. That's not to say that it's not a really great hobby.
Yeah.
Like, I follow a ton of clothing sewers on Instagram and stuff like that, right? But yeah, I think as an artist and a creative, you're always kind of balancing, like, life with a creative practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, that seems to be a common theme. A lot of the folks we've had on our podcast don't just identify with one form of art. Like, really seems to be always evolving, right? You started with one thing that kind of evolved into another, and then perhaps make a full circle and come back, you know, around to something. But that's really cool, though, about being in school. So what kind of things, just going back to your high school days, because I'm imagining, you know, you at home, you got some, like, cool outfits that you've, like, picked out from the thrift store, and then you're modifying this stuff.
Yeah.
You must have been, like, the popular one with all of the cool fashion.
super stylish.
Or I looked like I was wearing tablecloths because I was. I went through, like, a distinct period of turning tablecloths into wrap skirts.
Okay.
So
I like it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, you know, like I find it really fascinating just what high school looked like for, say, me and you versus your daughter.
Right. But Mya, you are our youth resident on the podcast. So was that something, though, growing up that you saw in school? People making their own clothes, adapting clothes? Because I feel like this whole era of thrift clothes modification has kind of come back nowadays.
Yeah, I will say, like, thrifting is pretty popular, like, within my generation. But in high school, I don't think I seen anyone. I mean, I'm sure there was, like, some girls who crocheted and stuff, like, their tops. But mostly, there wasn't a lot of people who are sewing. That's why I'm like, we should bring it back. Cause, like, not a lot of kids, like, know how to sew and stuff, right? And, they used to have, like, home ec classes, but now it's just strictly, like, a foods class. There's
really?
They don't teach, like, sewing or anything in school.
Oh, you don't make, like, a pair of boxer shorts or something?
Nope. That's right. Yeah. That's what I had to make in
It was
school,
like pajamas.
And I remember I sewed my pockets in backwards, and I had my papa help me to do it. So him and I were very proud that we did it. But that was the end of my sewing career.
I think thrifting is a really, it's funny that thrifting is trending now, because I think it's great, right? It's sort of this anti-consumerism kind of vibe.
But then some thrift stores go way crazy, like, with their prices.
Yeah.
I've been to some, and it's like, okay, this doesn't feel like thrifting anymore, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
But
And when I was young, too, it was very much, you know, it was a creative outlet, but also I was raised by a single mom, and I had a part-time job by the time I was 15. So it was like, there weren't really school clothes that I wanted to buy, but also I couldn't afford name brand things.
Yeah.
So it was like, if you want something different, it was nice to have those skills to make it unique yourself. And things were still cheap at the first store.
Well, I think especially now, like, things have gotten so expensive, and, like, we're at an interesting point in our world right now that I kind of feel like people are going to start going back to, like, trading goods and, you know, thrifting, like, more that kind of stuff to, I don't know, like, save money, like, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
well, for sure. Absolutely. So one of the things we also do on our podcast here is we do have some clay out in front of us, and you are more than welcome to play with it as we are having this conversation as well. And then we like to see creatively what we have all made in the end here.
Cool.
So yeah, help yourself, play with it. We also have some fun tools to do that, to cut it up, have fun.
I'm already inspired. I know what I'm
Good.
making.
See, I never know what I'm making. I just kind of go with the flow of it.
Yeah.
So you took drawing also in school, right? That was one of the passions that you had. So how did that translate then to, you talk about printmaking. Does that go hand in hand with the drawing? Now you're putting the print on the clothing that you've made?
Yeah. So actually, I really love that you bring these out, because where I'm going to go with that is like you're constantly just translating what you see through your hand and your body. And that's something else I think I didn't realize until I was older, is just how embodied a creative practice can be, because we spend so much time in our brains. But anyway, drawing is also like the foundation of every creative sort of skill. Fashion, you know, we when I was in fashion school, it's like, okay, how do different fabrics drape on the body, and how do you render different textures with a pencil if they're different fabrics, you know, versus velvet versus a satin. And then I also completed an interior decorating diploma in my 20s. So then that was interesting too, because it's like, how do you draw a sofa that looks different? Or how do you capture like the perspective of a room or a bookcase from a different angle? So drawing is a really interesting foundation that way. And then in terms of printing, what's fun is like when I'm carving, I carve out of something that's rubber, so like something firmer than this, but still, it's just a kind of like one of those skills you learn as a kid, like a
bicycle kind of thing. Or
well, no, it just a pencil transfer. So like you can have a pencil drawing, which is what I've done a lot. Is just draw whatever you want, your print or your block to have. And then you just flip it over, put it on the block, rub it hard. Your pencil marks stick on the block, and then you just get to carving. So what's really interesting about that is, okay, well, you have the drawing that you loved already because you wanted to turn it into something different. But then there's this, like, translation that happens because you'll carve it, and then the rubber does its own sort of translation. So then when you print it, there'll be its own set of like textures inherent. So it looks like you're drawing, but it also looks like a new version of your drawing through print. Yeah. So I love that because there's always something unexpected that happens. You know, there'll be a part that, you know, a texture that your knife tip created because it's thin versus thick. And then you could really carve the same drawing using different carving tips and get a completely different effect of the same drawing. So yeah, there's always a surprise in printmaking.
And I never thought of that. I never really thought of the whole process of printmaking, but that's really cool that it involves carving in there. And then so are you able then to translate that kind of carving onto other objects like wood, or like you do other types of carving as well with that skill? Like
I haven't carved in wood, no. Because there's different substrates you can carve into. So there's like really soft blocks to like a true lino block, which is quite hard, and then wood as well. Yeah. But I'm kind of instant gratification. So like if you're carving in a softer block, it's faster to finish your carving. So that's why I love to use like rubber versus true lino. And they do just give a different effect, but it really comes down to preference and what you want to use it for. And I find that rubber blocks print on fabric much better too.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Something like that, huh?
So do you have like your own like clothing brand? Like do you sell clothes, or like you're just making t-shirts, or like
No. So what's interesting about the fabric part is where do I start this? Block printing was like a hobby that I sort of like found while working and just doing the life things, right? So I feel like there's been different stages in my life where I've been a working artist and then returned to a career, and then been a working artist and returned to a career, which is fine. I think that is the life of an artist,
pretty
really.
Much, yeah.
But yeah, I really got into block printing probably a decade ago, and then I forget the question again.
I was just curious, like what you do with your clothes. Like, you sell them? Or...
Okay. No, I've never really had my own fashion line, and I've never really made clothes to sell. Mostly because it's a pretty big time investment, and I just never went that way. But what I did end up doing was making, I went through a period as well, probably, more than a decade ago, of making like bags.
Oh, cool.
So, because you can print fabric, and then sometimes I would paint on it too. And then I would make like a lunch bag or a little clutch or like small totes and things.
Nice.
So that was kind of fun at the time. And then I think too, right? It was always just something on the side. So then when I did, I was able to sort of take on being a working artist and doing the printmaking. I actually prepared for a couple of art shows. So then it wasn't really thinking about, okay, what's something small that I could sell at an art market? Yeah. It was more like, okay, I'm going to have a show. You want to showcase what can I make to put on a big wall, you know, or how do I fill a gallery? So yeah, in terms of like, what's your motivation to make? I think, your brain goes to different spaces.
Totally, yeah.
When there's different end goals.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
So where was that art show, your first one?
Yeah, well, this is interesting too. It's kind of tied to my time involved in a city project.
Right.
In Fort St. John. So the city of Fort St. John built a passive house as a demonstration home.
Right.
And my partner has a background in sustainable construction and wood engineering. And so we saw this project going up, and it sort of had like some starts and stalls, kind of like projects in the north, right? Like it wasn't an energy project, so it didn't always have people working on it.
Yeah.
But we just showed an interest and sent an email to the city and said, like, we think this is cool. Like, do you need help moving it forward?
Yeah.
So my partner was able to do a bit of finishing work on the home. And then the intention was always to monitor how much energy this house used. And so in order to do that, it needed people living in it. Right. So my partner, Paul, and I said, well, we'll be the oddballs who go and live in it for you. Which is a pretty unique situation to be in. So we were caretakers, and we lived in this home for just about 2 years.
Right.
And through the course of that time, like, a lot of things changed in our life. It was also like a really big time in the region. So the house was connected to like energy usage, right? Because a passive house is basically, I should explain what they are. They have really thick walls, and they're really well sealed. So they're airtight, which means you don't lose the heat. So if you have the furnace on, or if you're generating heat, the heat's not being lost out of the leaky doors and windows and things like that. So it means that they can be cheaper to run and more comfortable to live in, which I can say that it 100% it was. And so through the 2 years we were there, I was also in the process of transition at my day job too. So I was the manager and co-owner of a cafe called Whole Wheat and Honey at the time. And it was in the process of ownership transition. So we listed the cafe for sale, and it took a while for it to sell, but eventually it did sell to a staff member. But also we were planning to move to Prince George after we moved out of the house so that my partner could complete his master's at UNBC. So I was in this space of like, I don't know what I'm going to do next.
Yeah.
The job that I've loved and the place that I've loved is going to the next person. And so for the last kind of year or 6 months that we were in the passive house, I decided to like give myself my own artist residency.
Okay.
In that house. So I actually made like my own little certificate that said like Catherine Ruddell is going to be an artist in residence at the City of Fort St. John Passive House for the year 2016 or whatever year it was. And I like wrote it up in markers and stuff just as a way to like take myself seriously and keep myself accountable.
Yeah.
And that was actually a place where I was really able to explore my block printing on fabric in a new way. And one thing I did during that time as well was I signed up to go on like an artist retreat to India.
Oh, cool.
And so I was able to go to India and learn about block printing from the place where it originates. And that was really cool. That was a really cool experience. And then came back to the passive house and then just started like making my own fabric from my own blocks, from my own drawings.
So you made your own fabric? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
You made that?
Yeah. So I ended up through that project. I'm like, I'm gonna make enough fabric to make a quilt. And so I ended up carving probably like 20 different blocks and then printing about 60 square feet of my own fabric.
Oh, wow. So how did you make your own fabric? Like,
I bought plain fabric and printed on it.
Okay, gotcha.
So when I say
patterns,
you're not making the fabric.
Printed my own fabric.
Gotcha.
Good clarification.
Yeah. Wow, this is really industrious.
No, that probably would have taken a whole nother 2 years.
Yeah, no kidding.
So then what came of that was basically it's my creatively sustained quilt. And creatively sustained was also the name I came up with for my company that I still use based on that project that happened inside the Passive House.
Cool.
That's really cool. That's really neat. I remember that. I remember those days when the Passive House was there. We used to go for tours all the time because my mom, Nan, was the city manager at the time and was involved in that project. And I know she was super proud of it and thought it was such a cool project for Fort St. John to have because it was an energy hub for the North. To be able to showcase this kind of sustainability and stuff. I know it was something she was really proud of. And Whole Wheat and Honey, I do have to say thanks for bringing that up because that was my first office. Because years ago when I started in my work, I traveled a lot and was traveling in different communities, and I used to love coming there, and I used to get so inspired just being in your space. And probably why, because you created so many cool projects and just have a creativity behind it. But that was a really wonderful cafe as well. So
And while I was there too, the vibe is such a big part of a space. So there were definitely points in time where, that we had a lot of musicians coming through and live music happening. And, I tried to have different artists up on the walls every couple months, you know. So there's a lot of creative freedom that happens in small businesses too. And so I think too, that's why I really... I think it's important to describe myself as an entrepreneur too, because you just kind of have to find a way to bring creative work forward sometimes that's different than...
Well, I didn't know half of the stuff that you've done. I'm like, oh, she does print and stuff. I'm excited to learn about that. In fashion school, went to India, lived in this house. Also had no idea what a passive house was. I think I'm learning a lot right now.
And it's kind of... I mentioned creatively sustained, but when I was working on that quilt project in that house and not really knowing, I knew we'd be moving to Prince George and what am I going to do next, right? Yeah. So it's this transition is a huge thing. And what I have struggled with in my career and as an artist too is becoming overly attached to an identity that you've created for yourself. Because when it changes... you kind of feel like you're losing a part of yourself. And so I think too, creatively sustained is about recognizing that I'll always be able to do something with my mind and my hand and my creative expression. And so knowing that it's the actual practice that sustains you versus the output. Because the output can change and you can be really proud of all different kinds of things. But if you're overly identified as okay, I'm a cafe owner, or okay, I'm a fashion designer, and then those things shift.
Well, you don't want to put yourself in a box for sure. 'Cause,
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think there's a lot of pressure too when you're an artist or a creative person to look a certain way, right? Because a lot of folks struggle against stereotypes, but I think artists definitely, right? There's so many tropes about artists are flaky or chaotic or they're starving or and it really doesn't have to be that way, even though sometimes it is. You're not destined to those things, you know.
No, I like that. I really like the way, your thinking is and the whole idea of being a creative entrepreneur. I never kind of thought or framed artwork in that way, but makes perfect sense to me that's exactly what you're doing, right? You're not really, pigeonholing yourself into one area, just taking all the skills as it comes. It's very free flowing. You have this energy that's very nice and very free flowing.
Oh, thanks. And Mya mentioned it too, we're sort of coming back to this age of mutual exchange.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It doesn't all have to be rest on these commodification. That's been a big struggle for me in my work as well, because there's been times where it's okay, I could do a fashion line, but also, or I could like produce a line of bags, but I've always been really conscious of like disposable culture too. Yeah. And so if you're going to be really dedicated to something, there's been times in my life where I'm like, oh, do we really need more stuff?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, I think too, that's where I'm a bit of like a big thinker. And so maybe sometimes those ideas are like what hold me back.
Right.
Right. But also I think too, it's really good to sort of like examine your motivations for doing something or, yeah.
Well, it's definitely good to like try out all different types of art and like, see what you like or what you're more into.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things you were mentioning, though, about going to the thrift store and getting clothing from the thrift store, that's kind of a way, though, we talk about the sustainability, right? Then Mya brought that up about people starting to regenerate this type of art. Is that something else? Do you take not just thrift store clothing, but other found objects and turn them into, use them in your art projects as well, like as a way to kind of keep that sustainability?
Oh, that's interesting. I think the way that it shows up now, like my next phase or evolution as an artist is really getting back to food.
Oh, okay. Oh. Food. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I've managed a cafe, and at the time, Whole Wheat and Honey started 17 years ago, which is really hard to say. Like, I still don't feel like I'm old enough to say things like that.
I'm with you.
But, Fort St. John and, Dawson Creek, too. Dawson Creek's been more, like, agrarian than Fort St. John the last, forever.
Yeah.
Farming community.
Yeah.
Fort St. John was a farming community, too, until oil and gas got really big. But when you're a cafe owner and food is a really big deal, and, this is the thread. It was the Site C Dam flooded a bunch of farmland, right? So there was a real push around this time as well for small-scale farmers to just be growing and providing food in the region. So at that time, there was, my last couple years at the cafe, there was a real interest in local food again. So there was a small, they're friends still, but like it was called Hip Piece Produce. So they started growing a bunch of food down on Bear Flat and brought that up to the cafe. We used it in our recipes and things. So, and food, when you look at art, it's like, okay, art is a creative outlet, definitely. But the other thing that everybody does every day is like feed themselves.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, no, we just did our last episode was with these ladies who like freeze dry food and make meals that way, and that totally can be art. Like cooking is so art,
And that's the other thing. It's like you're using your hands. You're like moving through different processes. You're transforming things from one state to another, right? Like here's all these root vegetables, and now they're a beautiful pot of soup.
Yeah, literally.
It's a process that's very similar to making anything in art.
Yeah. Huh. And so is like when you talk about food, then are you thinking of cafe? Like of now you're opening another cafe or doing something else, or just the fact that you're at home, you're just really enjoying and
creative expression for me now is in my garden.
Right.
So
okay.
Over the last few years, my partner and I, we moved to Prince George. We were there for about a year. We then moved to the Kootenays for about a year for his work, and then we ended up coming back up home to Fort St. John, and we have 1 acre. And so I would say the last 6 or 7 or 8 years, just every year expanding a part of my garden.
Okay.
Adding a greenhouse one year, adding some more raised beds the next year, to the point now where there's just this same process, right? Like come winter, I'm like pulling out my markers and my paper and like dreaming up what it's going to look like this year, right? Like you're drawing out your rows and you're trying to decide like, okay, am I going to do them straight, or am I going to do like something creative? Like, am I going to group them or make a curve or something like that? And then also just knowing too that like, you're going to put something in the ground, you have to take care of it, you have to watch over it. Eventually you will like be successful or not, because I think gardening is really also growing food is really humbling because things don't always work out. And you might have to figure out why, right? It might be a bug, it might be the weather, it might be a hot spell, right? So always just sort of paying attention. And I think that's the other thing that creatives are just so good at, right? Like we're paying attention and we're connecting dots to sort of like make meaning of the world around us. But yeah, so right now it's like, okay, well, I have also experienced a lot of just feeling good, doing things like that, right? Like when you're gardening, like it's also very physical. You know, I've brought this up once before. Like it's a very embodied sort of like hobby or task or whatever you want to call it, life skill. And there's a certain amount of patience involved, but I think as well it really ties into that sustainability idea too, where you start to recognize how miraculous it is that we have grocery stores full of food.
Oh yeah, like
when you start to grow your own food, you realize sort of like how precarious things can seem.
Can be,
right? Like, you know, I have a good friend, and she said to me once, I was telling her about like whatever new beds I had in my garden that year, and she's like, "Oh, you're like self-sufficient then." I'm like, "No way, exactly. No way am I like, yeah, it looks big, but no, this would not feed us all winter, let alone."
Right. Yeah.
So it's I don't know. I think it's really important to sort of like learn about where things come from, right? Yeah. And that's sort of taken on a bit of a different meaning too, you know, in the past couple years where we've seen just interruptions in supply chain, whether it's, you know, goods that aren't food too, right? Like we've seen the groceries. Toilet paper. Thank you. Yeah. So like toilet paper or food, like we've sort of had these little wake-up calls where it's like, oh yeah, where does that come from? Because I sure notice when it's not there.
Yeah, right. It's not there. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like that. Yeah, no, gardening is definitely a skill that to be sustainable on it is quite a feat, because we have tried in the past too doing gardening and not very successful. Thank goodness we still have stores. Right?
Yes. Yeah. And you know, it's still like really it's still really satisfying to produce what you can. Yeah. Oh, if you have the space. Yeah. The other side of that too is that gardening and producing food, trying to, it sort of reconnected me to like my Métis culture and heritage as well. Yeah. When I was growing up, my aunt had a really big garden, and I just thought that's what people did. Like you would on the weekends go to your aunt's house and help her with chores.
That was a normal thing, yeah.
Which it might be, but you know, it is like Métis foodways are a lot about women doing things together, being together, whether it's like on the land or in the kitchen, or and I think that translates across a lot of cultures that have had to provide for themselves too, you know. So a lot of folks have had to sort of like gather what you need and help each other along in order to make a go of it. So yeah, it's learning more about my Métis heritage too has been something that was part of that quilt project that happened in the Passive House. During that time, I did a lot of I'm also kind of a history geek. So like I think I mentioned I did a year of art history, which is just learning about culture from like the 10,000 foot view as well. Because when you know, the first couple years of art history in college are like, okay, well, there's architecture in Greece and Italy, right? Like there's like incredible chapels and stone buildings. And then there's also the, you know, just the ways that society was captured in like massive grand oil paintings versus photography now. Right. Yeah. Right. Like it was, they was really like documenting what was happening in the medium of the time. Yeah. Right. So a lot of things like that, I just find fascinating learning about like how and why things happen the way they do. And I think that that's also you know, you can learn about ancient things and how they came about, or you can learn about modern things. And I think that that's a process of self-discovery as well, because we all come from culture.
Yeah.
Whether it's, you know, like on my European side, I have family from Scotland and England and Ireland and Wales. And I really don't know a lot about my culture on that side of the family either, right? Like there's very specific things that I could learn about from them. And then there's also really specific things I can learn about from my Métis family. And what's really been interesting is like, it's also been a journey of like reconnection, because I would say that, you know, visiting my aunts in the garden and helping out, like you wouldn't necessarily say, oh, like that's an Indigenous cultural thing.
Right. No, but it gives you like a sense of community too. And
yeah. And growing up, I always knew that my family was Métis. Like a lot of my grandma and her brothers and different family members like were visibly Indigenous. So nobody ever tried to hide the fact that we were Métis. But also my great grandma, she lost both of her parents in the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918, 1919.
Okay.
And that was over in Spirit River, so not far from here, like 40 minutes.
Right, yeah, not far at all.
Yeah, and then from then, her and her sister were orphaned, basically, and then they were raised by the Catholic Church. So they didn't go to residential school per se, but they were still removed from their family's culture in some way, right? And so there's a lot of things that I just don't know that weren't passed on to my grandma, right?
Yeah.
So it's been really interesting, even being an artist who is really into textiles, who was actually like really terrified to like pick up a needle and some beads for like a lot of my adult life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, food and growing felt like something that was like accessible.
Yeah.
And something that still really offered me a lot. Like it gave me a lot. It felt fulfilling. And there's a lot of inspiration there too, right? Like, so being at the cafe, leaving the cafe, going through that, like I had a period where I carved a bunch of blocks, and it was like, I called it my vessels series. And it was basically a bunch of random ways that you could carry vegetables from the farm to the back door of the cafe. So there was like, and maybe this was a digital drawing rather than a block, but there was like, you know, the tote bag, the grocery store bag, the milk crate, the like orange box, like all of these random like vessels, which you wouldn't really think of. You know, you think vessel is like a vase. But, so and then vegetables, you know, I've done workshops with youth in Fort St. John where it's like, okay, well, we'll do like potato stamping, because carving shapes into potatoes is something that's really accessible for young hands. Like I do the carving and they do the printing usually when they're that young. But
do you get a lot of youth involved?
Yeah. So one way that my creative career also kind of morphed is like, when I was a working artist, I felt very alone. I feel like that's my like tension with self-employment or like working as an artist on my own, is you spend a lot of time by yourself, which can be okay until it's not.
Sometimes it's needed for the art, but then definitely can get a little, what's the word?
Isolating.
There we go. Isolating. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one shift that I made too, is like, okay, well, I'm going to start like teaching and hosting workshops, because then I'm in a room full of people and I'm sharing what I love with others. So I went through a period of time too, where I was doing a lot of workshops in printing and different things with adults and then with youth. And that actually took me on like my official residency.
Right.
So there was the one I made up for myself, and then there was the one I actually went to through an organization. So I, as an artist, you know, you just keep your eyes on things in the internet. You're looking for grants or you're looking for opportunities. And one of the opportunities that I saw was to get involved with an organization called InPath and go on 6-week residencies teaching art in schools.
It's gotta be an awesome job, honestly. Like,
it's also terrifying. Youth are great, but they can be scary sometimes. Like, I don't know. So you recognize like how uncool and old you are to young people sometimes.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, I thought I was hip.
That's cool.
But yeah, no, that was a really cool time. So I got involved with Empath in 2019. And I became, like, I joined their artist roster, basically. And so then the next time that placements came up, I got a placement, which was really cool. I spent 6 weeks in northern Quebec, and it's called EUSG, so it's the territory of the Northern Cree there. And I lived in a community of about 2,000 people. It was called Waskaganish. And I taught at the high school art class that they had. So the program itself within that school was called Mukjam, and Empath developed that program alongside the Cree School Board. And it was developed as a way to keep kids engaged in their studies. Art class is a really important class in a lot of high schools for youth. And bringing in artists to share whatever it is they know how to do with the students over 6 weeks in a way that was tied to curriculum, and they could still earn their credits and things like that. So that was a really interesting way to also like translate what you know as an artist into, a formula that helps students achieve an objective, right, that they can use for school. And it was also really interesting, too, just to live in community and live on my own. There was community housing, so, I lived in this townhouse on my own for 6 weeks and would walk to school, and it was October, so I kind of got to experience their, it was like really sunny and warm fall when I arrived, and by the time I left, it was snowing, so it was a really cool time.
And you did your printmaking, like
So I
printmaking.
I took the youth through like, okay, here's how you take your drawing onto a block.
Yeah.
And then what I really loved about that program too is like there was a lot of, there was a guiding question, and it was really connected to just, I want to say empowerment, but that doesn't feel like the right word. Just like building confidence in youth.
Right.
So the guiding question for my residency was like, what is your superpower? And so they were able to sort of explore that through icons or symbols. And then it sort of culminated in like a painted mural on fabric, kind of like what you have behind you there.
Okay, yeah.
Except it was probably like 2 feet by 2 feet. They had a square of fabric, and then they could paint on it, they could print on it, and then they could also like bead or embroider, like anything they wanted to bring, any skill they wanted to bring.
It's a good outlet, like.
Yeah, and it was really neat to watch them move through that, right? And bring their own strengths to their own canvas and bring their own interpretation to the techniques. And then it sort of culminated in an art show at the end. And then, we had a big celebration. And that's one thing I really loved about that program as well. Like, celebration was such a huge part of it. And I think, too, that I really try and bring that into my life now, because I think we can be so just focused on like completing a thing and moving on to the next thing, but I think it's really important to sort of like honor what we're able to accomplish,
so celebrate
and celebrate little wins too, in your artwork or your life.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, this whole journey, you've been through so many different things that you've done throughout your whole lifetime, and it's not even over. You're just beginning in lots of ways. All of the things that you have been doing. It's been so lovely to have this conversation and to learn more about everything that you do. The last thing before we wrap things up here I want to touch on is the fact that you do these safe space facilitations, which I think is really cool and such a needed thing right now in our world. So if you want to touch on what you do around that.
Yeah, so cultivating safe spaces is a framework that was developed by a woman named Elaine Alec. I found her on the internet,
right?
Like a lot of people. But she's Silk and Secwepemc. She's from the Penticton Indian Band. And she developed this through her work as a community planner. So she spent a lot of time working in the Indigenous planning space, and she has a really varied background as well. But anyway, it's a framework that's like rooted in Indigenous knowledges from her people, but it's also, it really relies on the storytelling and lived experiences of the person facilitating the work.
Right.
So, you know, there's, and basically it's a framework that's like, helps us learn how to get along and stay in conversation with each other, which is really important to me too. I went back to school during the pandemic, and I completed my degree in professional communications. So I think that's also been like a through line in my career is, you know, how do we share what we want to share from our heart in a way that will land with the other people that are needing to hear it. And Safe Spaces work too has really shown me that what my superpowers are again, right?
So what's your superpower?
Yeah, so cultivating safe spaces goes through a bit of a process. It's like, I like to think of it as like, how am I responsible for the ways I show up with others? What do I need to know about myself? And then what are some like protocols or some ground rules for everybody to kind of like be aware of and honor? And so I think some of my superpowers are the ability to hear the things that are going unsaid, right? There's a lot, and I know you're a communicator too, so I see that resonates.
Read between the lines.
Read between the lines. I think communicators are innately like good at that, and sometimes that can be a lot to hold. But also I think too, the more that you start to learn about yourself and start to reframe some of the things you're able to do as strengths, it just builds your confidence as well. So I've gained a lot of confidence through the practices that cultivating safe spaces enforces, or like, that sounds like a really strong word, but like it doesn't enforce things, it cultivates things.
Yeah.
And so part of that too is like two of the primary questions that are asked when I'm facilitating is like, who are you? And what's on your heart? And so who are you is, you know, it's part of the way I introduce myself. My name is Catherine. I'm an artist. I'm also a Métis woman. My family grew up in this place, and that shapes how I see the world and how I interact with people, right? And then what is on my heart is, you know, I think what artists are trying to do, which is like translate the things they're seeing and the things they're feeling into something that has meaning, and then sharing it with others. And it's like, I think too, that is what a lot of art is. Like, this is what's on my heart right now.
Yeah.
And so I think each reinforces the other, but what I love about it is that cultivating safe spaces is something that I can share in community with groups of people. And again, that's that tension between like doing personal work and learning about myself versus like needing to be around people. Yeah. Needing to stay in community. And I think that as our world just becomes like more digital and like inherently isolating in that way, that community just becomes like that much more important. And I think we've all recognized over the last handful of years like how challenging it can be to be in community spaces where people think differently or hold different ideas. But what I really love about cultivating safe spaces is that it just reinforces we think differently because we are different, and that's a good thing. But how do we respect each other and still move about not causing harm as best we can? And so I really like to think about my facilitation of the framework as like harm reduction work, which, you know, it sounds very like social worky.
Yeah, very, very serious.
but I think we need that, you know, like we all have complex feelings, and sometimes our feelings are hurt, and sometimes, you know, I think we just really long to be like treated more kindly. And I don't think that's a bad thing to ask for, and I don't think that's I think that's a really honorable thing to strive for in community, is that we show up kinder with each other. Yeah.
I think social media has made people mean.
Absolutely.
So we definitely need that. Are these like open to the public type workshops that you do, or do people contact you? And
So what I'm hoping to do this year, I'm going to bring this back around and put a nice little bow on it, is in the coming year, I'm really hoping to facilitate cultivating safe spaces on my property and my garden.
Oh, beautiful.
So the way I'd love to do that is just hosting spaces, having a gathering where people can come. And I might do this in a couple of different program formats, but essentially it's like, how do I stay engaged in this work more often? So I'd really love to do, a cultivating safe spaces program that's focused on like general well-being. And I see that being really aligned with the things that I do and experience when I go to a yoga class, right?
Yeah.
Because there's like this real personal side of it and an embodied side too.
Yeah.
And then in the garden as well, it's like, okay, well, it's about being in relationship with each other in a respectful way. And so in the garden, how do we do that with the land, right? Because there's this, the idea of kinship with the more than human is also a really Indigenous sort of worldview. So how do we be in good relationship with the land around us? And that's really great when it's like food and something that like nourishes your body, right? Is really concrete that way. And then another interesting, need I see emerging is cultivating safe spaces in the area of emergency management. And that sounds like a stretch, but my partner, his former career was with the BC government as a wildland firefighter. So he did that for 20 years. And we still have a lot of like close friends from that time and work from that sector that are either engaged in it or have forestry companies and do different kinds of work. And living in the north, I know you know this too, fire seasons are longer and their impacts are way more pronounced. And so again, cultivating safe spaces is really trauma informed and recognizing the ways that like trauma shows up in our brain and affects the way we think and the decisions we make. And so I think too, cultivating safe spaces is about bringing people together in a group and sharing space and holding space for one another. And I just see a greater need for that too, when communities or areas are evacuated and they have to leave their home on short notice and then they have to go and stay at the rec center for a week or two, right? That's a really disruptive experience, and there's a lot of emotions that go with that. But I think too that it's starting to look at those kind of situations holistically. So we've managed like the nuts and bolts logistics side of things. People have somewhere to go. They have coupons to go to the store, get something to eat. But then how are we also taking care of like the nervous system and the like mental health well-being, that's attached to the people, right? So I think that's just, I'm just a helper too, right? So I, as a creative entrepreneur who's like actually really cares about things, right? And has big feelings about things. It's just, I think you're looking for, how can I bring this forward and so that more people can benefit from it. So
Well, I love it. We are almost out of time here, so I want to share first what we have made out of our little claymations here. Yes. This has been such an awesome conversation with you. I feel like we could talk for about another hour.
I know. I have more questions I could ask.
We may have to have you back and continue this conversation. So I don't know what I've made. I was trying to go for a little scene of flowers here. That's what I have made.
A frog with a hat.
Oh, cute.
A frog with a hat, and you got you got a puppy.
No,
it's not a puppy.
I love it. It needs your frog head. So it's
there you go.
There we go. This is me as a teenager in my wrap skirt.
Okay, yeah.
And the other thing I would wear was like a baseball t-shirt. Like with the baseball sleeves.
Yeah.
And this is it. I remember this tablecloth. It was like kind of looked like the babushka scarves, you know? It was red and had all these flowers. So this is
I love it. That's awesome.
This is the skirt I was wearing in high school.
Beautiful. We love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on our Oddball podcast. We love it that you're part of our Odd Pod and one of our oddballs with us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I really love this. This was fun, and I'm glad that you're doing it together. It's nice to talk to a couple of you.
Totally new experience for me, but I feel like I'm learning a lot.
And I love the questions you asked too.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Way to go, team.
Yay!
Yay!